When I say exceptionalism, do you say America? Sadly, fewer and fewer Americans are seeing that these days. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And before I get into today's topic, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for your faith-based podcasts, at washingtontimes.com, where you can also sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, containing all my commentaries that I write all day, all week long at the Washington Times, as well as my Tuesday and Thursdays Bold and Blunt podcast. Or you can just get Bold and Blunt by going online and searching out wherever fine podcasts are offered. Exceptionalism, is it still part of the American makeup? In June of 2017, a headline from Pew Research Center said, most Americans say the U.S. is among the greatest countries in the world. And let me read a bit from this poll. A majority of the public, 85% in fact, says either that the United States stands above all other countries in the world, or that it is one of the greatest countries along with others. Just to break it down, 29% said in that poll that the U.S. stands above all other countries in the world. 56% said it is one of the greatest countries, as well as some others. And here's the interesting point. Only 14% of Americans said back then in 2017 that there are other countries better than the United States. Let's fast forward now to the same poll, the same organization, Pew Research Center, posing the same question, June 2022. Many Americans say the U.S. is among the greatest countries in the world. The United States is one of the greatest nations in the world. By the numbers, 52% of Americans said the U.S. is one of the greatest countries in the world, along with some others. 23% said the United States stands above all other countries in the world. But get this is the sad and sorry statistic. Roughly a quarter, 23% said there are other countries that are better than the United States. Almost a quarter of Americans in 2022 said in this Pew survey, other countries beat out the United States. Sad and sorry, but true. And why is this happening? Well, you can look at what's taking place in the churches for one clue. As The Guardian reported just this January, churches are closing at rapid numbers in the United States as congregations dwindle across the country and a younger generation of Americans abandon Christianity altogether, even as faith continues to dominate American politics. Here's the tie. As America grows more and more secular, as Americans turn farther and farther away from the church, and the society grows more secular, so opposite grows the government. The government grows bigger and bigger. And of course, you're not going to have a satisfied public when it's government put in the position of having to provide all from cradle to grave. There are bound to be massive differences in what people expect government to provide for. I mean, that's the big battle on the political stage nowadays, right? Liberals want government to provide for everything, so government can control everything. Conservatives want government to go by the Constitution, where individuals work for what they get in life. In the end, America was founded on the idea that rights come from the Creator, as so eloquently states the Declaration of Independence. And that means if you take the Creator out of the picture, big government comes in and takes over that leading role. And that's where we're at in America right now. And I have a great patriotic American here to discuss this right now. His name is Matt Lohmeier. He is an author, public speaker, former member of the military, former honored member of the military, former fired member of the Space Force, thanks to the Democrats and their hatred of all things America. And he's here today to discuss a little bit more about what makes America great, where American exceptionalism stands right now with Democrats in charge, and what the hope of the future is for the United States of America. Matt, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
happy to be here with you.
So I wanted to talk with you about one of my favorite topics of conversation because I think it is the key issue in America, and that is the importance of the concept of God-given rights. When I hear God-given rights, I think American exceptionalism. What do you think of?
Yeah, it's a great thought, and you tee it up as one of the key issues, and I think that's accurate. And one of the things I've seen, for better and for worse, as I've traveled about the country speaking at what are largely conservative conferences, and those conservative conferences are put on and attended well by largely Christian audiences. Everyone has seemed to pick out what they think their issue du jour is that is most important, and you can pick nearly any domestic policy concern or issue or problem that we're seeing, from the border to the drug trade and human trafficking to the election system or national security in the defense industry. And so I think it's appropriate that you tee up this idea of God-given rights as a fundamental issue, because we so often forget, even as conservatives or Christians, that the worldview, the Christian, very Christian worldview of our founders established a constitutional Republican form of government because of their adamance that certain rights be protected. But I do want to make a quick distinction, I suppose, because there's a lot of talk about rights, and it's not just conservatives or Christians that sometimes remember that and want to talk about rights. Even who you might characterize rightly as radical leftists also want to talk about rights. And the two groups tend to talk past one another. And so, philosophically speaking, or in a philosophical sense, there are basically two kinds of rights, and there's positive and negative rights in a philosophical sense. And the negative rights are the kinds of rights that conservatives might have in mind when they're referring to things like life and liberty, property, or the pursuit of happiness, these God-given rights that we expect should remain in place, and that the purpose of government is to properly protect those rights. And we also mentioned, of course, in the First Amendment, things like speech and peaceably assembling, and in the Next Amendment, the right to bear arms. So all of these rights that we talk about don't necessarily impose an obligation on others, other than that they need to conduct themselves in a manner in civil society that will not impede on our natural rights to certain things. And then there's positive rights, which so many others tend to also think belong to them. And they're more rightly termed entitlements, frankly, but positive rights obligates someone else to do something for you. And so people are running around talking about human rights, which encompass a broad range of things, and they talk about the right to an education. They talk about the right to health care, and it's important to not get those entitlements, those positive rights, confused for the God-given rights that you're talking about. But yeah, absolutely fundamental key issue to our founders, and should be to proper thinking American citizens today.
You know, I was thinking as you were laying out that well thought out analysis that the very fact that you have to spend so many words defining what used to be just a few short years ago commonly accepted shows how far we've gone from that concept of God-given rights. You agree?
I agree, and because I'm also focused a bit at the moment in my own private endeavors on public education, private education, and we homeschool our children, in fact, I've really tried to understand the evolution of even education in this country, and one of the things I'm coming to believe is that at a very basic level, we've lost touch with the importance of grammar, basic vocabulary and grammar studies, and so we teach people just enough of how to read so that we have a allegedly literate society, but they don't even necessarily anymore, though they speak the same language, share a common understanding of words. And so, I mean, speaking of biblical tie-ins, it reminds you of the idea of the Tower of Babel, where you've got a confounding of tongues or confounding of languages. And if you've wondered, like, how is it that takes place? We've got an excellent example, whether or not it's exactly what was referred to in the Bible, but you've got an excellent example might employ the same words but mean entirely different things by it, and they can't even understand one another. And that lack of a shared understanding, a basic grammar, leads us to have conflict, tension, and not even be able to use words to settle our disputes.
And how that plays out in the pragmatic, right? Because right now we're speaking mostly theoretical, but here's a real life example that I know you can expand upon because of your military background. The military just went through this horrific time where they were mandated to take shots that are experimental in nature just because the government told them to. A few years ago, I say this wouldn't have been thinkable, and yet it was done, it was forced. And if you follow the trail back, I connect it to the loss of God-given rights in America. How do you see it?
Right. That's a great way of looking at it and characterizing it, I think. It's a combination of things. One of the reasons why it's so easy to get the military, for example, to be compliant is because it's beat into their heads from early on, and for good reason, that they're to be relatively apolitical, on the one hand, and in addition to being apolitical, they're to follow orders and stay in lockstep with their chain of command. And so when a policy is established at the highest levels and all of the senior leaders are choosing to stay in lockstep, it becomes very difficult for all the other men and women in uniform to choose a different course of action, even if they sense something is wrong in the approach. They're perhaps not capacitated or capable of making the leap in their own minds. It's not a leap in reality, but a leap in their own minds that this has to do with fundamental rights that belong to me. You don't have access to put things inside my body if it seems to me to be illegal or unethical or unsafe. Not only do you have a right to reject or deny or to turn down or to abstain from the conduct imposed on you by that order. In fact, you should feel like it is your obligation to say no to such an order. But yeah, I think that what you saw, though, in that case that you bring up is that the 1% to 2% of military uniform wearers who actually dug in their heels and refused to get the COVID shot against their conscience and against their will tended to be conservative Christians who had an understanding about some fundamental God-given rights that they were in possession of, and they then found the courage to take action, practically speaking, against policy that they deemed unethical or illegal. And short of that belief that they had, they would have been like so many other tens of the percentage of the force that, despite their reluctance, they chose to cave in and comply. And I'll tell you, I've not heard from a single military service member, for that matter, who chose to not get the mandated shot who have regretted their decision. But I have heard from people who did comply against their will, who terribly regretted that decision, either because they felt convicted in conscience or because they ended up with unfortunate adverse effects as a result of compliance with that illegal order.
Yes, because when you believe in the idea of God-given rights, it goes to your identity. It doesn't even, it
Right.
goes beyond just belief. It goes to who you are. And then you are able to discern or recognize when anybody, no matter what rank they hold in life or society or politics, when anybody conflicts with that belief, and you find the courage to fight.
That's exactly right. And I want to point out something else, too, that's related to broader society and not just specifically pertaining to our uniform wearers, but often I'll relate something that Thomas Jefferson said. He warned about some of the very problems that we now face in a much earlier letter that he wrote in 1816. Now we're decades past the original War for Independence, and he wrote this letter to a Virginia state legislator speaking, the American citizenry is unfortunately ignorant. I mean, how many Americans know who the Kardashians are, but are ignorant of who the Secretary of Defense is? And if you're ignorant of who the Secretary of Defense is, you have no clue what kind of policy decisions are being pushed that are wrecking the good order and discipline and the morale and the readiness and lethality of our national defense apparatus. How many Americans know how to use TikTok and Facebook, but are ignorant of the fact that the United States has created a new branch of the military in December 2019 called the Space Force? And, how many Americans know all sorts of evil things, allegedly know all sorts of evil things about the founding of this country and its founders, but can't tell you anything decent about what they accomplished or the purposes for which our government were accomplished or who's on the ballot in the midterms this past calendar year. I mean, we've really got a terrible problem on our hands, and if Jefferson is right, and I think he was right, you can't expect in a state of civilization to remain free with that kind of ignorance. And so along with what you said is a key issue, the idea of God-given rights, we have to have a proper education of the next generation that's going to help them understand that. And, of course, that's why so many people are homeschooling. That's why private schools are thriving in many cases, and charter schools, because parents and citizens who are very concerned about what they see taking shape in modern American society are interested in trying to do better for their children than the government public education system has been doing.
And it's almost ironic that it was Jefferson who warned about an ignorant society, because if anybody is targeted for attack in this modern time, it's right. Jefferson, because he was a slave owner, but the ignorance part is that he fought heartily to expand America into a nation of non-slave holding. With his expansion, he wanted those states to be free, and that's conveniently forgotten.
It is. There's an excellent book. I have no problem putting in plugs for other people's books when I'm doing interviews, but he's someone I've met and now know and respect, but it's David Barton, a Christian author,
yes,
at Wall Builders, and he wrote a book called The Jefferson Lies, and he tries to address some of these very lies that the modern generation, the postmodern generation, are learning about our founders, but specifically Thomas Jefferson. And he tackles them head on, one by one, some of the most predominating myths about the man. And I wanted to always to respect Thomas Jefferson, but like everyone else, I was subject to a public education system that left me with a bad taste in my mouth for some of these guys. But he was far more noble than we're ever taught. He abhorred the practice of slavery, though he was a slaveholder, and sought nearly at every turn, it seems to me, to introduce legislation in his own state and at the national level that would have ended the practice in an orderly manner and not led to conflict. And so, we forget so much of this with each passing generation. It really takes mature thinking adults to study this stuff out so that we don't forget. We can conserve and transmit these values and these ideas and this history to the next generation. Otherwise, Reagan said it so well that we're always ever so close to losing liberty, to losing freedom. It's never more than a generation away. I mean, it's just so easy to lose our grip on the ideas, the ideals, the values, the history that make it possible for us to properly order ourselves in the modern civil society.
Yeah, I think we have a time frame. It takes about 3 years total, 3 years of COVID hysteria to seize individual liberties and turn us from a nation of individualism into one of collectivism. And, I know that you speak frequently in public, and another item that you always bring out is the need for citizens to be moral in order to stay free. And that comes from Adams. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I will. The quote I like to share in the past 6 months anyways, as I've been sharing about this, comes from a 1798 statement that John Adams made, and he said, "We have no government armed with the power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion." And then he goes on to say, we've heard that kind of thing, but he goes on to say, avarice, ambition, and revenge would break the strongest cords of the Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution is only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And we forget that too. And there's decent people all throughout the country. There's decent people all throughout the world. But in addition to the ignorance that we just talked about, by and by we've lost our moral footing as a society. And it really reminds me of his name gets thrown around a lot these days because big personalities like Jordan Peterson
yes.
quote him and talk about him. But Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago series, after all of his research into the history of the Soviet Union and interviews that he'd accomplished and trying to study the matter out and put words to the problems they were facing in communist Soviet Union, he says there's no better way to put it than men have forgotten God. That was the ultimate conclusion that so many had come to when they watched their society crumble around them. When you vacate the space in your soul from, I'll say, God, and in America it was the Christian religion. And it didn't necessarily, in my view, need to be a particular brand of Christianity or Judaism. I mean, the idea was, we're a Christian nation, but we welcome everyone as long as they adopt the American value system and ideals, and which goes right back to that key issue you mentioned, natural, God-given liberty or rights to their life and their property and the pursuit of happiness according to their conscience, to pursue the good life. And so we've forgotten that, and we've begun to abandon God. We've done that in a government-sanctioned kind of way in the public education system, and that's spread like a disease throughout every agency in this country. And now we're led by criminals. I mean that's the consequence of abandoning God and becoming an ignorant people. We end up with people that represent us. Unfortunately, I'm being extra critical and extra hard on even the American citizen. It's easy to point the finger at the other, but they're also just a symptom of some of the problems we face in modern broader society. And so, we need to become more intelligent. We need to to reestablish our moral footings. And the way that Solzhenitsyn puts it, the way that I like to frame that up and did in my own book, is that we require a form of national repentance right now if we were to salvage the greatness of America. Otherwise, we can elect even great men to office without those changes being made. It remains unlikely, in my view, that we'll see really genuine progress and real progress, not progressivism progress, but that is more regressive, but the kind of progress that allows for the civil society to flourish.
Yeah, it's really simple. You can't have God-given without the God, right? You take that out. And if you actually look at all the various battles in America, they all lead back to that one core point, that we've lost God, that we've turned from God. And I'm so glad you brought up about the importance of repentance, because some religious leaders don't even like to go there because they find that offensive. But that's not doing their due diligence as faith leaders. It's harming America.
Well, of all people,
right.
They should be comfortable sharing that message, right? And fortunately, part of not running for office and not being a religious leader, I'm comfortable saying any of that. I'm just an American citizen. And so I get to use my voice according to my conscience and say, we need a national repentance. And that resonates with tens of millions of Americans.
It does. And do you have time for one more question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I want you and your military experience. I'm sure some of my listeners already know you, but some don't. You lost your job in the Space Force because you were criticizing the military about the Marxist takeover of much in our military. And then you wrote this book, Irresistible Revolution, Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military, a tremendous book, a bestseller. Talk a little bit about your experience in the military and how you were able to stand for courage and principle in the face of such fire.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And I don't assume people would know my story or know about my book, and so I'm glad you've mentioned it. I just briefly, I'll say I flew jets for the Air Force, and then I ended up in what was then Air Force Space Command, and then eventually the Space Force, and was in charge of nation's space-based missile warning at the time that I wrote that book and was fired for writing it. But I, fortunately and very unfortunately, was at a particular base in Colorado that had as a base commander a political animal. And I came into command right as the COVID whirlwind was underway, and George Floyd had just been killed or died, however you see that. And so my base commander, he was a left-wing activist, and he seized an opportunity to start to politicize the military workplace. And it was a reflection of the kind of negative spiritual energy that you saw in the news at the same time. We're talking like late spring, early summer months of 2020, when Antifa and BLM were smashing windows, stomping on burning police cars, and threatening American citizens, forcing people to their knees to apologize for their privilege. And a bunch of the critical race theory really took hold in broader American society, and not just at elite universities in this country. That infected all of the military. Now, I saw it at my base early on because my base commander was such an activist, and it took some time to learn. But what I learned was that my base wasn't unique. There were other activists all throughout the military, from top to bottom, who were using the moment in history, that juncture we'd found ourselves in, to push politics on the people in uniform. And if you had a left-wing political view, you were all of a sudden welcome to just share it and push it on others with no consequence, but to speak up and say, hey, that's not welcome in the workplace here in the military, or that's something I disagree with, or that's not right, then you were labeled politically partisan, ironically. And all you were doing was trying to keep politics out of the workplace. So I ended up trying to use my chain of command to solve the problem, which they seem to have rendered themselves rather incapable of holding activists accountable, or chose not to. I filed a formal written complaint with the Space Force Inspector General's office, but that was dismissed in the aftermath of the presidential election of 2020. And so I chose to write a book, the book that you mentioned, Irresistible Revolution. And because they were so afraid of what the book might say before they ever read it, they fired me as soon as the book was published and they heard it had been published. And then they got their hands on the book, and I'm sure realized, geez, we can't really recover this guy's career. We fired him from command. We did a press release saying we lost our trust and confidence in him because he was politically partisan while acting in an official capacity, which is totally false. And now we've got his book, and we're looking, and it's like he wasn't politically partisan. He didn't criticize Democrats. He wasn't, pro-Trump, rah, 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 or vote Republican in the book, although I'm very conservative. It was an expose on Marxist ideology and social justice activism that had come into the military, and a critique of the trends of military culture. And so I separated just several months later without my pension, and have been speaking about it ever since. But while the book has done well and has been informative for Americans, I've really got the itch right now to write again. So I'm gonna take up the pen.
Good for you.
Kind of pick up right where I left off with that last book. And there's a new movie that should be coming out at some point in the next year that I've begun filming, and it's also documenting this story, and it's based on my first book.
Wow.
And so you can be on the lookout for that as well.
It's amazing. Just a quick note, I know we have to go, but it's amazing to me listening to you how God works, right? You think something's going wrong in your life, and then boom, in steps God, and he uses you for something greater than you ever could have imagined, I bet.
Yeah, it's really something. And, each of us has a unique sphere of influence, I like to say, and so that might be smaller or greater. And all we can ever do in that sense is try to act well our part in the sphere of influence God's placed us, so that we can be an influence for light and good and truth and those rights with our families, in our workplace, and we don't have to be combative about it either. Now, some people are in the combative arena. Sometimes I get to be combative, but you don't have to be in order to play your part well, and that requires, I guess, some discernment and some grace and some spirit to figure out how it is you're to proceed in your own individual lives. But we'll never regret acting consistent with our conscience if we believe in true values.
Right. And Matt, you're a great American patriot with a strong spirit of humility, which is such an uncommon combination these days. I know you carry forth a word that is just resonating on the American stage right now. And by the time this posts, you will be in Israel. So enjoy your trip. You'll have to come back on Bold and Blunt to talk more. But in the meanwhile, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to join you. Thanks, Cheryl. And maybe we'll talk Israel.
Yes.
Another call sometime.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right. Yep, thank you.
The website is MatthewLohmeier.com. That's MatthewLohmeier.com. The book is Irresistible Revolution, Marxism, Goal of Conquest, and the Unmaking of the American Military. And the podcast is Bold and Blunt, which you can get at edify.app, the online platform for your faith-based podcast, at WashingtonTimes.com, or wherever fine podcasts are offered. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.